The morning sun beat down on the dusty auction yard as people gathered around the livestock pens. It was one of those hot summer days where everything felt slow and heavy. But there was nothing slow about the tension in the air that morning. Dr. Rachel stood near the back of the crowd, her heart pounding in her chest. She'd been a veterinarian for only 2 years, fresh out of school and trying to build her practice in this small ranching community. Everything had been going well until 3 weeks ago when she examined a beautiful chestnut mare named Duchess for the Henderson family. The Hendersons were one of the biggest ranch owners in the county. Everyone knew them. Everyone respected them. And right now Mr. Henderson was standing in front of the entire community, pointing his finger directly at Rachel. "This woman right here," his voice boomed across the yard, "told us our prize mare could breed, said there was nothing wrong with her. We spent months trying, spent thousands on special feed and care, and nothing. Not a single pregnancy." Rachel felt her face burning. People were turning to look at her, whispering to each other. She wanted to disappear into the ground. Mrs. Henderson stood beside her husband, shaking her head dramatically. "We trusted you," she called out to Rachel. "You examined Duchess thoroughly, or so you said. You gave us hope, and now we've wasted an entire breeding season." Rachel opened her mouth to speak, but her voice came out shaky. "I recommended a follow-up exam. I said we should check again in 4 weeks to be absolutely certain." "Too late for excuses now," Mr. Henderson cut her off. "The mare is barren, worthless for breeding, and it's your fault we didn't know sooner." The auctioneer looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. This wasn't the usual way things went at these auctions. But the Hendersons were important people, and he wasn't about to interrupt them. Mr. Henderson continued, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. "So here's what's going to happen. This mare cost us $15,000. We bought her specifically for breeding based on Dr. Rachel's assessment. Since she can't do what we bought her for, she's worth maybe a few hundred at best now." Rachel's stomach dropped. She knew where this was going. "But we're reasonable people," Mrs. Henderson added, though her tone suggested otherwise. "We're not going to sue you for malpractice, even though we could. We're not going to report you to the veterinary board, even though maybe we should. Instead," Mr. Henderson said, crossing his arms, "you're going to buy this horse from us. Full price. $15,000. You pay for your mistake and we'll consider the matter settled." The crowd murmured. Some people nodded, seeming to think this was fair. Others looked away, uncomfortable with the public confrontation but unwilling to stand up to the Hendersons. Rachel felt dizzy. $15,000 was nearly everything she had saved. It was money she'd been planning to use for new equipment for her clinic, for advertising, for building her business. "I don't have that kind of money readily available," she said quietly. "Then you better find it," Mr. Henderson replied coldly, "by the end of this auction. Otherwise, we'll have no choice but to pursue legal action. And in case you haven't noticed, everyone here just heard about your incompetence. Good luck keeping your practice running after that." It was a threat, plain and simple. Rachel looked around at the faces in the crowd. Some looked sympathetic, but no one spoke up for her. No one questioned the Hendersons' version of events. She was new to the community, an outsider still trying to prove herself. The Hendersons had been here for generations. Her mentor, old Dr. Wilson, stood near the front. He caught her eye and gave her a small, sad nod. Even he seemed to believe she'd made a mistake. Rachel's hands trembled as she pulled out her phone and opened her banking app. The money was there, just barely. It represented 3 years of savings from her time in veterinary school. Every penny she'd scraped together from part-time jobs and scholarships. "Fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll buy the horse." Mr. Henderson smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Smart decision. Better to lose money than your entire career. The transaction happened quickly. Rachel transferred the money while the auctioneer documented the sale. Duchess was officially hers now, a $15,000 reminder of what everyone believed was her professional failure. As people began to disperse, going back to looking at other livestock, Rachel heard the whispers clearly. "Can you believe she couldn't tell a barren mare? That's the problem with these young vets. No real experience. I was thinking about using her for my cattle, but not anymore." Each comment felt like a knife. Rachel walked over to where Duchess stood in her pen. The mare was beautiful, with intelligent eyes and a glossy coat. She didn't look sick. She didn't look defective in any way. Rachel had examined this horse carefully. She'd checked everything, run all the standard tests, Nothing had indicated any problems with the mare's reproductive system. She'd been cautious, professional, thorough. She'd recommended that follow-up exam specifically, because early breeding assessments sometimes needed confirmation. But none of that mattered now. The damage was done. Dr. Wilson approached her as she stood staring at Duchess. "Rachel," he said gently, "these things happen. Even experienced vets make mistakes sometimes. You'll learn from this and move forward." Even her mentor thought she'd failed. "I don't think I made a mistake," Rachel said quietly. "Something doesn't feel right about this," Dr. Wilson sighed. "I know it's hard to accept, but the Hendersons had their own vet check her too, after your exam. He confirmed the mare couldn't conceive. Sometimes we miss things. It's part of learning." Rachel felt tears threatening but held them back. She wasn't going to cry here, not in front of everyone. She arranged for a trailer to transport Duchess to her small property on the edge of town. As she loaded the mare, she could still hear people talking, still feel their eyes on her. The drive home felt endless. Rachel kept replaying the examination in her mind. Had she missed something? Was there some sign she'd overlooked? She'd been so careful, so thorough. Her phone rang 3 times during the short drive. 3 clients calling to cancel upcoming appointments. It had already started. When she finally got Duchess settled in her small barn, Rachel sat down on a hay bale and let herself feel the full weight of what had just happened. Her savings were gone. Her reputation was destroyed. Her practice was falling apart. All because of one horse that everyone said was Barren. Rachel looked at Duchess, who stood calmly eating hay, completely unaware of the chaos she'd caused. "I don't know what I missed," Rachel said aloud to the horse, "but I'm going to figure it out. Because something about all of this doesn't add up." She had no idea how right she was going to be. The next morning, Rachel woke up hoping the previous day had been a nightmare. But then she saw her bank account balance and reality crash down on her all over again. $15,000 gone in a single afternoon. She made coffee with shaking hands and checked her phone. 7 missed calls. For a brief moment, her heart lifted, thinking maybe they were new clients. Then she listened to the voicemails. "Hi, this is Tom from Red Creek Ranch. I'm calling to cancel our appointment next week for the cattle checkup. Found another vet. Thanks anyway. Yeah, this is Jennifer. We had you scheduled to look at our horses next month, but we're going to go with someone else. No hard feelings." The messages went on like that, professional but cold, each one a door closing in her face. By the time she got to her clinic, she already knew what kind of day it was going to be. The small veterinary office she rented on Main Street looked the same as always. But everything felt different now. She unlocked the door and turned on the lights, but no appointments were scheduled. Her calendar, which had been filling up nicely, was now full of cancellations. Around 10 in the morning, Mrs. Patterson came in. She was an elderly woman who'd been one of Rachel's first clients, bringing her old dog in for regular checkups. "Dr. Rachel," she said kindly, "I heard what happened at the auction yesterday." Rachel tried to smile. "News travels fast in a small town." "It does," Mrs. Patterson agreed. "And I want you to know I still trust you completely. You've taken such good care of Buster, but—" She hesitated. "My son called me last night. He's worried about me using a vet who might have made such a big mistake. He thinks I should switch to Dr. Morrison over in Millbrook." Rachel felt her throat tighten. "I understand. I'm so sorry, dear. You seem like such a nice young woman. I'm sure you'll bounce back from this." Mrs. Patterson patted her hand and left, taking Buster with her. That was the worst part. People weren't being mean. They were being kind while they abandoned her, which somehow hurt more. Around noon, Dr. Wilson stopped by. He brought sandwiches from the deli down the street. "Thought you might not be eating," he said, setting the food on her desk. Rachel hadn't realized how hungry she was until she smelled the food. They ate in silence for a few minutes. "How bad is it?" Dr. Wilson finally asked. 10 cancellations so far. 5 people asking for their records to be transferred to other vets. Rachel stared at her sandwich. "My phone hasn't rung with a new appointment all morning." Dr. Wilson sighed heavily. Small towns can be harsh. One mistake and everyone knows about it before sunset. "I keep going over that examination," Rachel said. "I checked everything. The mare's overall health was excellent. Her reproductive system appeared normal. All the standard indicators were good. I documented everything properly. Did you do an ultrasound?" The Hendersons didn't want to pay for one. They said they'd had her checked before buying her and everything was fine. They just wanted a basic exam to confirm she was ready for breeding. Dr. Wilson nodded thoughtfully. And you recommended a follow-up? Yes, I specifically noted in my report that we should do another check in 4 weeks after they'd tried breeding her. Early assessments can be inconclusive, as you taught me. I remember teaching you that, Dr. Wilson said. So why didn't they bring her back? They said they wanted to wait longer. Give her more time. Rachel rubbed her temples. Then yesterday they claimed she was barren all along and I'd missed it. Their other vet confirmed it? That's what they said. I don't know who they used or when. Dr. Wilson looked like he wanted to say something but stopped himself. Rachel, in this profession, sometimes you have to accept that you won't always be right, even when you think you are. After he left, Rachel sat alone in her empty clinic. The afternoon stretched ahead with nothing to fill it. She should have been seeing clients, checking animals, doing what she loved. Instead, she was sitting in silence, wondering if her career was over before it had really begun. Her phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Heard about the Henderson situation. Sorry for your trouble, but we can't risk using an inexperienced vet for our breeding program. Best of luck to you. It was from the Johnson Ranch, where she'd been scheduled to do a major consultation next month. That contract alone would have paid her rent for 3 months. Rachel drove home that evening feeling numb. When she got there, Duchess was standing in the paddock enjoying the late afternoon sun. The mare looked so peaceful, so healthy. There was nothing about her that screamed problem animal. Rachel walked out to the fence and Duchess came over immediately, nuzzling her hand looking for treats. You're costing me everything, Rachel said softly, and I still don't understand why. That night she pulled out all her veterinary textbooks from school. She reviewed everything about equine reproduction, reading page after page about fertility assessments, breeding soundness exams, early pregnancy detection. She was looking for something she might have missed, some sign or symptom she'd overlooked. But the more she read, the more convinced she became that she'd done everything correctly. Her examination had been thorough and professional. Her recommendations had been appropriate. Something wasn't adding up. The next day was worse. 2 more clients canceled. Someone left a negative review online, saying she'd misdiagnosed their horse, which wasn't even true since she'd never treated their horse at all. But the damage was done. The review was public and people believed it. By the 3rd day, Rachel's clinic was like a ghost town. She sat at her desk staring at the walls, wondering if she should just give up. Maybe she should move to another state, start over somewhere nobody knew about the Henderson situation. But something stubborn inside her refused to accept defeat. She'd worked too hard to become a veterinarian. She'd spent years studying, training, learning. She wasn't incompetent. She knew she wasn't. That evening, Rachel drove back home and went straight to the barn. Duchess greeted her with a soft whinny. Okay, girl, Rachel said, pulling out her stethoscope. Let's figure out what's really going on with you. She decided to do a complete examination, more thorough than the one she'd done for the Hendersons. This time there was no one rushing her, no one standing over her shoulder questioning every move. Just her, the horse, and the truth, whatever that might be. Rachel worked slowly and carefully, checking every aspect of Duchess's health. Her heart rate was normal, her temperature was perfect, her coat was shiny and healthy, her appetite was clearly good based on how much hay she'd been eating. Then Rachel moved to the abdominal examination. She listened carefully with her stethoscope, checking gut sounds, making sure everything was functioning properly. And that's when she heard it. It was so faint she almost missed it. A tiny rapid rhythm that didn't match Duchess's own heartbeat. A secondary pulse faster and lighter. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. She moved the stethoscope, listening again, making sure she wasn't imagining it. There it was again, clear as day once you knew what to listen for. A foal's heartbeat. Duchess wasn't barren at all. She was pregnant. Rachel stood there in the barn, her hand shaking as she held the stethoscope. Everything suddenly made terrible, perfect sense. The mare had probably been in very early pregnancy during the Henderson examination, too early for standard detection without an ultrasound. That's why Rachel had recommended a follow-up. That's why everything had seemed normal but inconclusive. But if Duchess was pregnant now, she would have been pregnant then too. Which meant the Hendersons had lied. Their other vet had lied. The whole situation at the auction had been a setup. But why? Why would they do this? Rachel needed to be absolutely certain before she did anything. She couldn't afford another mistake, especially not now. First thing tomorrow morning, she would run a proper ultrasound on Duchess using the portable equipment she'd bought last year. She barely slept that night, her mind racing with possibilities and questions. What she'd discovered could change everything, or it could mean nothing if she was wrong. But in her heart, Rachel knew she wasn't wrong. That tiny heartbeat had been real. 3 days after the worst moment of her professional life, Rachel might have just found the evidence that would prove her innocence. She just had no idea yet how deep the deception really went. Rachel arrived at her barn before sunrise the next morning. She'd barely slept, her mind spinning with what she'd heard through that stethoscope. A second heartbeat. She needed to be absolutely certain before she told anyone. The ultrasound machine sat in the back of her truck, one of her most expensive pieces of equipment. She'd taken out a loan to buy it, and she'd only made 3 payments so far. Looking at it now, she sent up a silent prayer that it would show her what she needed to see. Duchess stood calmly in her stall, chewing hay like nothing extraordinary was happening. Rachel took a deep breath and set up her equipment. "Okay, girl," she said softly, running her hand along the mare's neck. "Let's see what's really going on with you." She prepped the area carefully, applying gel and positioning the ultrasound probe against Duchess's abdomen. The screen flickered to life, showing shadowy images that would look like nothing to most people but meant everything to a trained eye. Rachel moved the probe slowly, searching. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Then there it was. On the grainy black and white screen, clear as day, was the unmistakable shape of a developing foal. Rachel could see the tiny head, the curve of the spine, even the little legs tucked up. And there, flickering like a tiny beacon, was the heartbeat she'd heard. "Oh my God," Rachel whispered. She took screenshots, multiple angles, documenting everything. According to what she was seeing, Duchess was approximately 4 months along. 4 months, which meant during that original examination at the Henderson Ranch 3 weeks ago, the mare had already been 3.5 months pregnant. Rachel's hand started shaking as the implications hit her. This wasn't a case of her missing something. The pregnancy had been too early to detect easily without an ultrasound during her basic exam, exactly as she'd suspected. That's precisely why she'd recommended the follow-up appointment. But here's what didn't make sense. At 3.5 months, if the Hendersons had taken Duchess to another vet for a thorough examination like they claimed, that vet would have found the pregnancy. It would have been detectable with proper equipment, unless that other vet never existed. Unless the whole thing had been a lie from the start. Rachel saved all the images and backed them up to her computer and cloud storage. This evidence was too important to risk losing. Then she spent the next hour simply observing Duchess, watching her movements, her behavior, everything. The mare was definitely pregnant. She was showing subtle signs now that Rachel knew what to look for. A slight thickening in her belly, a particular way of moving, small behavioral changes that were easy to miss if you weren't looking for them. Rachel sat down on a hay bale, her mind racing. If Duchess had been pregnant all along, why would the Hendersons claim she was barren? Why would they publicly humiliate Rachel and force her to buy the horse? She pulled out her phone and looked up Duchess's breeding information that she'd saved from the original examination. The mare had championship bloodlines, descended from multiple award-winning horses. A foal from her would be worth serious money, potentially tens of thousands of dollars depending on the sire. A terrible thought occurred to Rachel. She opened her laptop and started searching through online records, looking for anything she could find about the Hendersons and their ranch. What she found made her stomach turn. There were several news articles from various horse breeding forums and agricultural newspapers. The Hendersons had been selling off livestock for the past 6 months. Not in a normal way, but quickly, almost desperately. Several people had commented that it seemed like they were in some kind of financial trouble. Then Rachel found something else. A notice from an insurance company, posted on a public forum by someone asking about claim procedures. The Hendersons had filed an insurance claim 3 months ago for a breeding failure involving a mare that couldn't conceive. 3 months ago. Right around the time Duchess would have been just getting pregnant, Rachel's blood ran cold. They'd filed an insurance claim saying the mare couldn't breed. Then they'd made a big public show of blaming Rachel for not catching it. Then they'd forced her to buy the horse, probably for way less than Duchess was actually worth. It was fraud. Plain and simple. and they'd used Rachel as their scapegoat. But Rachel needed more proof. She needed to be absolutely certain before she accused the Hendersons of anything. These were powerful people in the community, and she was already at the bottom of everyone's trust list. She spent the rest of the day documenting everything she could about Duchess. She took videos of the mare, photos of the ultrasound images, detailed notes about her behavior and physical condition. She recorded every finding, every measurement, every observation. That evening, Dr. Wilson called her. "How are you holding up?" he asked. Rachel hesitated. She wanted to tell him what she'd found, but something held her back. "I've been better. Listen, I know this is hard, but you're going to get through it. Every vet faces setbacks. You'll rebuild your practice eventually. Dr. Wilson, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "That mare I examined for the Hendersons. Do you know if they actually took her to another vet after me?" There was a pause. "They told me they did. Why?" "Who was the vet?" "They didn't say." "Why are you asking, Rachel?" She didn't want to share her suspicions yet. Not until she had everything figured out. "Just trying to understand what I might have missed. Professional development, you know." After they hung up, Rachel sat in her barn watching Duchess for hours. The mare was peacefully eating dinner, completely unaware that she was at the center of what might be a major scandal. Rachel pulled out her original examination notes from the Henderson ranch. She documented everything carefully, as she always did. Clear notes stating that Duchess appeared healthy, breeding assessment was preliminary, and a follow-up examination was strongly recommended within 4 weeks for confirmation. But then Rachel noticed something strange. She logged into her digital record system, the cloud-based software where she kept all her patient files. She pulled up the Henderson file. The notes were different. Her recommendation for a follow-up exam had been changed. Instead of follow-up required for confirmation, it now read, "Breeding assessment complete. Mare cleared for breeding program." Someone had edited her digital records. Rachel felt sick. She immediately checked her backup files on her personal computer. There they were, the original notes exactly as she'd written them. But somehow the cloud-based records that clients could request access to had been altered. This wasn't just fraud. This was calculated. Someone had hacked into her record system and changed her documentation to make her look incompetent. Rachel spent the next 2 hours going through every security log she could access, trying to figure out when and how her files had been changed. The system showed an access point from 3 weeks ago, right before the auction, an IP address she didn't recognize. She wasn't a tech expert, but she knew she needed help. This was beyond veterinary medicine now. This was criminal activity. The question was, what should she do next? If she went public with what she'd found, would anyone believe her? She was already labeled as the vet who couldn't tell a barren mare from a breeding one. Now she'd be claiming the mare was actually pregnant. Her records had been hacked and the Hendersons had committed insurance fraud. It sounded crazy, even to her own ears. But Rachel had proof. She had the ultrasound images. She had her original backup files. She had the evidence of the altered records. She just needed someone who would take her seriously. As the sun set that evening, Rachel made a decision. She wasn't going to let the Hendersons destroy her career with their lies. She wasn't going to let them get away with fraud. And she definitely wasn't going to let them keep painting her as incompetent when she'd done nothing wrong. She just needed to figure out the best way to expose the truth without looking like she was making desperate excuses. That night, Rachel reviewed the ultrasound images one more time. The little foal on the screen was developing perfectly, completely unaware that its existence was about to turn a whole community upside down. "You're going to save my career, little one," Rachel said softly to the image. "And you don't even know it yet." 3 days after being publicly humiliated, Rachel had gone from devastated to determined. She had the evidence. She had the truth. Now she just needed the courage to fight back against people who were much more powerful than her. But she'd already lost everything once. What more could they take from her? It was time to prove she'd been right all along. Rachel couldn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those ultrasound images. A healthy foal developing perfectly inside a mare that everyone believed was barren. The mare she'd been forced to buy for $15,000 after being publicly shamed. At 3 a.m, she gave up on sleep and went back to her computer. She needed to understand the full picture before she did anything. Making accusations without solid proof would only make things worse. She started by researching insurance fraud in the livestock industry. What she found shocked her. Apparently it wasn't uncommon. Ranchers facing financial difficulties sometimes claimed animals were sick, injured, or unable to breed, collected insurance money, then quietly sold the animals elsewhere. The key to getting away with it was documentation. If you could show veterinary records supporting your claim, insurance companies rarely questioned it. They'd pay out the claim and move on. Rachel's stomach churned. That's what they'd needed her for, not just as a scapegoat, but as documentation. Her examination, twisted and manipulated, gave them the veterinary records they needed to file a false claim. She pulled up the Henderson Ranch website. It was professional, well-designed, showcasing their breeding program and champion horses. But when Rachel looked closer, she noticed something odd. Several horses that had been listed on their website 6 months ago were no longer there. No mention of them being sold, no updates, just gone. She started searching for those horses in online sales records and breeding databases. It took hours, but she finally found them. 3 horses previously owned by the Hendersons, all sold within the last 6 months to buyers in different states. All of them sold for significantly less than their breeding value. And each sale had happened shortly after the Hendersons had made some kind of insurance claim. One for lameness, one for a respiratory issue, one for breeding failure. Rachel felt cold. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was a pattern. The Hendersons were systematically defrauding their insurance company, and she wasn't their first victim, just their most recent one. The sun was coming up when Rachel finally found the smoking gun. Buried in an online forum for horse breeders, she found a post from 7 months ago. A rancher from 2 counties over had posted asking about a mare he was interested in buying from the Hendersons. Beautiful bloodlines, the post read. They're asking $40,000, which seems fair, but I heard they just tried to breed her unsuccessfully. Anyone know if there are fertility issues with this line? Several people had responded, including someone identifying themselves as a breeding consultant. That person had written, I evaluated that mare myself about 2 months ago. She was in early pregnancy at the time, healthy foal development. Not sure why they're claiming breeding failure. Might want to ask questions before buying. Rachel's hand shook as she took screenshots. This was dated 8 months ago, which meant when she'd examined Duchess for the Hendersons, the mare was already known to be pregnant. They'd lied to her from the very beginning, but it got worse. Rachel kept digging and found another forum post, this one from just 4 months ago. Someone had written, just a heads up to the breeding community. The Henderson Ranch filed an insurance claim for mare fertility issues. Same mare they were trying to sell me for top dollar last month, claiming she was confirmed pregnant. Something fishy going on there. They'd tried to sell Duchess as pregnant. When that didn't work fast enough, they'd filed an insurance claim saying she was barren. Then they'd used Rachel to make it all look legitimate. Rachel printed everything. Every forum post, every sales record, every piece of evidence she could find. Her small home office looked like a detective's investigation room by the time she finished. But she still had one major problem. All of this evidence was circumstantial. It suggested fraud, but it didn't prove it definitively. The Hendersons could claim the forum posts were about different horses, that the timelines were confused, that Rachel was making desperate accusations. What Rachel needed was someone from inside the situation. Someone who could confirm what really happened. Someone with credentials and reputation who could support her claims. That's when she remembered the post mentioning a breeding consultant, someone who'd evaluated Duchess months ago and found her pregnant. If Rachel could find that person, if they'd be willing to testify about what they'd found, that would change everything. She went back to the forum and looked at the username of the breeding consultant. It was listed as High Country Breeder. Not a real name, but maybe she could track them down through their other posts. Rachel spent hours going through every post this person had made on the forum. They were clearly knowledgeable about horse breeding, had strong opinions about ethical practices, and mentioned several times that they ran a ranch in the northern part of the state. One post mentioned a specific county. Another mentioned winning an award at a particular livestock show. Rachel cross-referenced everything, searching for ranches in that county that had won awards at that show. She found 3 possibilities. Then she narrowed it down by looking at which of those ranches specialized in the same breed as Duchess. There was only one match. Canyon Ridge Ranch, owned by someone named Clayton, a well-known but somewhat reclusive rancher who rarely gave interviews but had an excellent reputation in breeding circles. Rachel's heart raced. Should she contact him? Would he even remember examining a horse 8 months ago? Would he be willing to get involved in what was clearly going to become a messy situation? She looked at the clock. It was barely 7 in the morning, too early to call. She needed to approach this carefully. This could be her only chance to prove what really happened. While she waited for a reasonable hour to make contact, Rachel went back to Duchess. The mare was already awake, standing in the morning sunlight. Rachel did another examination, documenting everything again. She wanted as much current evidence as possible. The foal's heartbeat was strong and steady. Duchess showed no signs of distress or health problems. Everything about this pregnancy was normal and healthy. "How much are you really worth?" Rachel asked the mare softly. "What are they afraid of people finding out?" At 9 o'clock, Rachel took a deep breath and dialed the number for Canyon Ridge Ranch. A woman answered, sounding businesslike but friendly. "Canyon Ridge Ranch, how can I help you?" "Hi, my name is Dr. Rachel Thompson. I'm a veterinarian, and I'm trying to reach someone who might have evaluated a mare for the Henderson Ranch several months ago. I believe they work with your ranch?" There was a pause. "May I ask what this is regarding?" Rachel had prepared for this. "I'm dealing with a professional matter involving a mare's breeding assessment. I have some questions about a previous evaluation, and I was hoping to speak with the consultant who performed it." Another pause. "Hold please," Rachel waited, her heart pounding. This was it. Either they'd help her or they'd dismiss her as the incompetent vet from the auction story they'd probably already heard about. A deep voice came on the line. "This is Clayton. You're asking about a Henderson horse?" "Yes, sir. I'm the veterinarian who examined a mare named Duchess for them about 3 weeks ago. I found her to be healthy but recommended a follow-up exam. They then claimed she was barren and blamed me for missing it. But I've recently discovered she's actually 4 months pregnant." Silence on the other end of the line. Rachel rushed on. "I found a forum post from someone who evaluated her months ago and found her to be pregnant at that time. I believe that might have been you. If so, I desperately need someone to confirm the timeline because I think the Hendersons have committed insurance fraud and used my examination as documentation." More silence. Then Clayton spoke, his voice careful. "Why should I believe you're who you say you are?" "Because my career has been destroyed over this. Because I have ultrasound proof that this mare is pregnant right now. And because I think you're an honest person who doesn't like seeing people get away with fraud." There was a long pause. "Then that was me on the forum. I evaluated Duchess for the Hendersons 8 months ago. They were trying to sell her to me for $40,000. The mare was about 6 weeks pregnant at the time. Healthy foal, good development. I turned them down because I thought their price was too high even for her bloodlines." Rachel's eyes filled with tears of relief. "Would you be willing to provide documentation of that evaluation?" "I keep records of every animal I assess," Clayton said. "Always have, always will. Saved me from trouble more than once." He paused. "I heard about what happened to you at the auction. Didn't sit right with me, but I didn't know you and didn't want to interfere. If what you're telling me is true, if that mare is still pregnant, then yes, I'll help you. But I want to see your proof first." "I can send you the ultrasound images right now," Rachel said. "Do it. And include your examination notes from 3 weeks ago. If everything checks out, we need to talk about next steps. Because if the Hendersons did what I think they did, they didn't just commit insurance fraud. They defamed you professionally, tampered with medical records, and probably did the same thing to other vets before you." After they hung up, Rachel sent everything to Clayton: the ultrasound images, her original examination notes, the backup files showing how her records had been altered. Everything. Rachel barely slept again that night. This time it wasn't from anxiety, but from adrenaline. She had an ally now. Someone with credibility and experience who believed her. Someone who could help prove she wasn't the incompetent vet everyone thought she was. She was up at dawn, preparing Duchess for the trip to Clayton's ranch. The mare loaded into the trailer easily, as if she knew something important was happening. Rachel triple-checked that she had all her documentation. The ultrasound images, her original notes, the backup files, everything. Clayton's ranch was about 90 miles away, a 2-hour drive through beautiful countryside. Rachel had looked him up the night before, learning more about the man who might save her career. He was in his late 50s, had been breeding champion horses for 30 years, and had a reputation for being difficult but fair. He didn't suffer fools, but he also didn't tolerate dishonesty. Perfect ally for what she was dealing with. The ranch came into view around 9 in the morning. It was impressive, much larger than she'd expected. Well-maintained fences, beautiful pastures, and a sprawling main house that spoke of success built over decades. A woman was waiting by the main barn. She waved as Rachel pulled in. "Dr. Thompson, I'm Linda, Clayton's ranch manager. He's finishing up with a conference call, but he'll be out in a few minutes. You can unload your horse in the covered arena there." Rachel got Duchess settled, and the mare immediately started exploring her new surroundings. She seemed completely relaxed, which was good. Stressed animals didn't present well for examinations. Clayton emerged from the house about 10 minutes later. He was tall, weathered from years of outdoor work, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He walked like someone who'd spent his whole life around horses, confident and efficient. "Dr. Thompson," he said, offering his hand. "Thanks for making the drive." "Thank you for seeing me," Rachel said. "I know this is unusual." Unusual is one word for it. Clayton walked over to where Duchess stood. He didn't touch her immediately, just observed. "Beautiful mare. I remember her. Those markings are distinctive." He spent the next few minutes examining Duchess, running his hands expertly over her body, checking her posture, her movement, her overall condition. Rachel watched, recognizing the practiced efficiency of someone who'd evaluated thousands of animals. "She looks good," Clayton said finally. "Healthy coat, good weight, calm temperament. Not showing obvious signs of pregnancy yet to the casual observer, but I can see the subtle changes." He looked at Rachel. "Show me your ultrasound equipment." Rachel set everything up, explaining her process as she went. Clayton asked sharp, technical questions, testing her knowledge. She realized he was making sure she actually knew what she was doing, that this wasn't just wishful thinking from a desperate young vet. She didn't blame him for being thorough. When the ultrasound image appeared on the screen, showing the developing foal, Clayton leaned in close. He studied it for a long moment, then nodded. 4 months, maybe a little more. Healthy development. Strong heartbeat. He straightened up. "This mare was definitely pregnant when you examined her 3 weeks ago. Early enough that a basic physical exam wouldn't necessarily catch it, especially if they didn't want to pay for an ultrasound." "That's exactly what happened," Rachel said. "They declined the ultrasound. Said they'd had her checked before buying her and just wanted confirmation she was ready to breed." Clayton's expression darkened. "They lied to you from the start. They knew she was pregnant because I told them myself 8 months ago. They wanted your basic exam to look inconclusive. Then they manipulated the documentation to support their insurance fraud." He pulled out his phone and opened a file. "Here's my evaluation from 8 months ago. Dated, signed with ultrasound images from that time. You can see the early pregnancy clearly." Rachel looked at the images. They showed a much earlier stage of development, but it was definitely the same mare. The markings matched perfectly. "Why would they do this?" Rachel asked. "I mean, I understand the insurance fraud part, but why go through all this elaborate setup?" Clayton gestured for her to follow him to his office in the barn. Once inside, he pulled up several documents on his computer. "The Hendersons are in serious financial trouble," he said. "Started about 2 years ago when they made some bad investments. Then they had a disease outbreak in their cattle that insurance didn't fully cover. They've been selling off assets, but not fast enough." He pulled up more files. "I keep track of major ranches in the region, mostly for business reasons. The Hendersons have sold or liquidated about 40% of their livestock in the past 18 months. That's not normal turnover. That's desperation. So they started committing fraud to get quick cash." Rachel asked. "That's my guess. File an insurance claim, get a payout, then sell the animal privately for additional money. Double dipping. It probably started small, maybe with an animal that actually did have problems, but when they saw how easy it was, they got greedy." Clayton pulled up another document. "I've been doing some digging since you called yesterday. The Hendersons have filed 6 insurance claims in the last year. 6. That's unusually high for a ranch their size, and each claim was for a high-value animal." Rachel felt sick. "How many other vets did they do this to?" "At least 2 that I've found so far. Young vets new to the area trying to build their practices. Perfect targets because they're vulnerable and don't have established reputations to fall back on." "This is bigger than I thought," Rachel said quietly. "Much bigger. and that's why we need to be careful about how we handle this. Clayton sat down at his desk. The Hendersons have connections. They know people in the county government, the local agriculture board, insurance companies. If we go after them publicly without absolutely rock-solid proof, they'll crush you. What do you suggest? Clayton was quiet for a moment, thinking. We need more evidence. My evaluation from 8 months ago, plus your current findings, prove the mare was pregnant all along. But we need to prove they knowingly filed false claims. We need to show the pattern of fraud, not just this one case. How do we do that? We find the other vets they did this to. We get their stories, their documentation. We build a timeline showing repeated fraudulent behavior. And we need to get the insurance company involved, because if they realize they've been paying out false claims, they'll have their own investigation team on it. Rachel nodded slowly. That makes sense. But how do we find the other vets? Leave that to me. I know people in breeding circles all over the state. I'll put out some careful inquiries, see who else has had problems with the Hendersons. Clayton looked at her seriously. But Rachel, I need you to understand something. Once we start this process, there's no going back. The Hendersons will know someone's coming after them. They'll fight back hard. Are you prepared for that? Rachel thought about the past week. The humiliation, the destroyed reputation, the empty clinic, the $15,000 gone from her account. I'm already destroyed, she said. They made sure of that. At this point, I have nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Good answer. Clayton stood up. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to document my examination of Duchess today, officially as a second opinion consultation. That gives us professional cover. Then I'm going to reach out to my contacts and find the other victims. Meanwhile, you're going to compile every piece of evidence you have. Every note, every record, every communication with the Hendersons. Can you do that? Yes, absolutely. And Rachel? Clayton's expression softened slightly. Stop doubting yourself. Your original examination was competent and professional. You did nothing wrong. They're the criminals here, not you. Those words hit Rachel harder than she expected. She felt tears threatening and blinked them back quickly. Thank you, she managed. You have no idea how much I needed to hear that. They spent the next hour going over everything in detail. Clayton took his own ultrasound images of Duchess, documented everything with timestamps and digital signatures that couldn't be altered. He wrote a formal evaluation stating that, in his professional opinion, the mare had been pregnant for approximately 4 months, which aligned perfectly with his original evaluation from 8 months prior. This documentation is bulletproof, he said, printing multiple copies. Keep these somewhere safe. Make digital backups. This is your evidence. As Rachel prepared to load Duchess back into the trailer, Linda approached her. I just want you to know, Linda said quietly, what the Hendersons did to you was wrong. I've worked in this industry for 20 years, and I've seen people get chewed up and spit out by people with more power and money. I'm glad you're fighting back. I'm glad I found people willing to help me fight, Rachel said. The drive home felt different than the drive there. Rachel still had a destroyed reputation and an empty appointment calendar. She still had a bank account that was $15,000 lighter. But now she had proof, allies, and a plan. Her phone rang as she pulled into her driveway. It was Clayton. I've already found one of the other vets, he said without preamble. Young guy set up practice about 40 miles from you 2 years ago. The Hendersons did almost exactly the same thing to him with a bull. He ended up closing his practice and moving out of state. Rachel's heart sank. Did they destroy him too? The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Rachel's empty clinic, which had felt like a tomb of her failed career, suddenly became mission control for building the case against the Hendersons. Clayton had been true to his word. Within 3 days, he'd found 2 other veterinarians who'd been targeted by the Hendersons in similar schemes. The first was Dr. James, who'd practiced in the area 2 years ago before being run out of town. The second was Dr. Patricia, who'd almost lost her license over accusations of incompetence after examining a Henderson horse. They'd all agreed to participate in building the case. They all wanted justice. Rachel spread out all the documentation on her clinic's large exam table. It looked like something from a crime show. Timeline charts, insurance claim records that Clayton had managed to obtain through his industry connections, veterinary records, forum posts, financial documents showing the Hendersons' declining situation. This is incredible, Dr. James said when he video called to see what they'd gathered. He was living in Colorado now, working at a large animal hospital, his dream of running his own practice abandoned after what the Hendersons had done to him. I never thought anyone would believe me. I thought I was the only one. That's what they counted on, Clayton said. He'd become the unofficial leader of their group, his experience and connections proving invaluable. They targeted young vets, people who were vulnerable and isolated, people who wouldn't have the resources or confidence to fight back. But we're fighting back now, Rachel said firmly. The evidence they'd compiled was damning. The pattern was clear. The Hendersons would purchase high-value animals, insure them heavily, then create situations where they could claim the animals were defective or unable to perform their intended purpose. They'd manipulate young veterinarians into providing preliminary examinations, then alter the documentation to support insurance claims. But the most shocking discovery came when Clayton's contacts at an insurance company started digging deeper. They've filed claims with 3 different insurance companies over the past 2 years, Clayton explained during one of their planning meetings at his ranch. Each company independently. That's fraud on an even bigger scale than we thought. How much money are we talking about? Rachel asked. Clayton pulled up a spreadsheet. Based on what I've been able to piece together, probably close to $200,000 in fraudulent claims. Plus whatever they made selling the animals afterward. Rachel felt dizzy. That's massive. It is. And that's why the insurance companies are very interested in what we've found. I've been in contact with fraud investigators from 2 of the companies. They're building their own cases, but they need our veterinary evidence to support the claims. Dr. Patricia joined them via video call. I've been going through my old files. I found something else. The Hendersons altered my records too, just like they did to Rachel. Changed my recommendations, made it look like I'd declared their horse completely sound when I'd actually flagged several concerns. That's evidence of a pattern, Clayton said, making notes. That's exactly what we need. The more they dug, the worse it got. They found 5 other ranchers who'd bought animals from the Hendersons, only to discover the animals had undisclosed health issues or were misrepresented. They found a former employee of the Henderson Ranch who was willing to testify that he'd been instructed to keep certain veterinary visits off the books. Linda, Clayton's ranch manager, had taken on the role of organizing everything. She created detailed timelines, cross-referenced dates, and built a case file that was impossible to dispute. You should have been a detective, Rachel told her one afternoon as they worked. Linda smiled. I spent 20 years in ranch management. You learn to document everything because ranchers can be difficult. Never thought I'd use those skills to help take down fraudsters, though. The hardest part was staying quiet about what they were doing. Rachel wanted to shout from the rooftops that she'd been right all along, that she wasn't incompetent, that the Hendersons were criminals. But Clayton insisted they wait until everything was ready. If they get wind of what we're doing before we're ready, they'll destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses, and use their connections to shut us down, he warned. We get one shot at this. We need to make it count. So Rachel endured the continued whispers in town, the canceled appointments, the knowing looks from people who thought she was the vet who couldn't tell a barren mare. It burned, but she held her tongue. Dr. Wilson stopped by her clinic one afternoon. He looked concerned. Rachel, I heard you're spending time with Clayton from Canyon Ridge Ranch. What's going on? Rachel had to be careful. Dr. Wilson meant well, but he was friends with the Hendersons. If she told him too much, word might get back. He's been giving me some advice about building my practice, Rachel said, which wasn't entirely a lie. Mentorship stuff. Dr. Wilson looked skeptical. Just be careful. Clayton's a good man, but he has a reputation for being confrontational. You don't want to burn any more bridges in this community. After he left, Rachel felt a pang of guilt. Dr. Wilson had been kind to her, had tried to help her through what he thought was a professional failure. He'd be shocked when he learned the truth. The breakthrough came 3 weeks after that first visit to Clayton's ranch. One of the insurance company investigators called with news. We've subpoenaed the Hendersons' financial records, she told Clayton, and we found something interesting. Large deposits into their personal accounts within days of each insurance payout. Deposits that don't match any documented livestock sales. They were pocketing the insurance money directly, Clayton said. Exactly. And we found emails between Mr. Henderson and someone at a computer services company. Emails about accessing cloud-based veterinary record systems. Rachel's heart raced. That's how they altered my records, we believe so. We're getting warrants for all their digital communications now. This case is getting bigger by the day. But there was still one piece of evidence they needed. Proof that Duchess had been pregnant all along. Clayton's records from 8 months ago and Rachel's current ultrasound showed the pregnancy. But they needed something that definitively linked the two time frames. That's when Linda had an idea. What about the foal's DNA? She suggested. If we can identify the sire, and if the Hendersons have records of that stallion, we can prove when the breeding actually occurred. Clayton snapped his fingers. That's brilliant. Breeding records would show exact dates. If we can prove the foal was conceived before Rachel's examination, that's undeniable proof. Rachel contacted a veterinary genetics lab. They could do a paternity test once the foal was born, but they could also do prenatal testing now with a blood sample from Duchess. It's expensive, the lab technician warned. Around $3,000 for the full genetic panel and paternity analysis. Rachel looked at her bank account. She'd been living on savings for weeks with no income. But this could be the final piece of evidence they needed. Do it, she said. I'll find the money. Clayton heard about her decision and called her that evening. I'll pay for the test. I can't ask you to do that, Rachel protested. You're not asking. I'm offering. This isn't just about you anymore, Rachel. This is about stopping people who've been defrauding insurance companies and destroying careers. Consider it an investment in justice. The genetic testing took 2 weeks. They were the longest 2 weeks of Rachel's life. In that time, more evidence kept piling up. Another vet came forward. The insurance investigators found more suspicious transactions. A reporter from a regional agricultural newspaper caught wind that something was happening and started asking questions. Clayton handled the reporter carefully, giving just enough information to keep them interested, but not enough to tip off the Hendersons. When we're ready to go public, we'll need media coverage, but not yet. Finally, the genetic results came back. Rachel opened the email with shaking hands. Clayton on video call to see the results at the same time. The foal's sire was identified. And according to the breeding registry records that Linda had tracked down, that stallion had been at the Henderson Ranch exactly 9 months ago. He'd been there for only 2 weeks, brought in specifically for breeding season, which meant Duchess had been bred during that specific window. The conception date could be calculated precisely, and that date was 3 weeks before Rachel's examination of the mare. We've got them, Clayton said quietly. This is indisputable proof. Rachel felt tears running down her face. Proof. Finally, undeniable proof that she'd been right all along. What happens now? She asked. Now we take everything we've gathered to the authorities. The insurance fraud investigators, the state veterinary board, and the district attorney. We present our case, all of it, and we let the legal system handle the rest. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep again, but this time it was from excitement rather than anxiety. Tomorrow, they were filing formal complaints with multiple agencies. Tomorrow, the truth would finally start coming out. She went to the barn to check on Duchess. The mare was resting comfortably, her pregnancy now visible to anyone who knew what to look for. In about 2 more months, the foal would be born. You saved me, Rachel told the mare softly. They called you worthless and barren, but you proved them wrong. The meeting at Clayton's ranch started at 8 in the morning sharp. Rachel arrived to find 3 cars already parked outside. Insurance investigators, a representative from the state veterinary board, and someone from the district attorney's office. This was really happening. Clayton met her at the door. Ready? Rachel nodded, carrying her box of documentation. As ready as I'll ever be. The meeting room was set up like a formal presentation. Linda had organized everything beautifully, with printed packets for each official, a projected timeline on the wall, and all the evidence sorted and labeled. For the next 3 hours, they presented their case. Rachel explained her original examination of Duchess, showed how her records had been altered, and presented the current ultrasound images. Dr. James and Dr. Patricia joined via video call to describe their similar experiences. Clayton presented his evaluation from 8 months ago and the genetic testing results proving when the foal had been conceived. The officials asked sharp questions, took detailed notes, and examined every piece of evidence. Rachel's stomach was in knots the entire time. What if they didn't believe them? What if the Hendersons' connections were too strong? But as the presentation continued, she saw the officials' expressions change. Skepticism turned to interest, then to concern, then to determination. "This is one of the most comprehensive fraud cases I've seen in agricultural insurance," said the lead investigator from the insurance company. "The pattern is clear, the evidence is solid, and the financial trail backs everything up." The representative from the veterinary board looked grim. "The manipulation of medical records is extremely serious. That's not just fraud. That's a violation of professional ethics that could result in criminal charges." The assistant district attorney was already making calls. "We need to move quickly. If they realize we're onto them, they might try to flee or destroy evidence. I'm requesting warrants now." Clayton had insisted on one more thing before they went to the authorities. He wanted to confront the Hendersons publicly, the same way they'd humiliated Rachel publicly. "Is that wise?" the district attorney's representative had asked. "It's necessary," Clayton said firmly. "They destroyed this young woman's reputation in front of the entire ranching community. That community needs to see her vindicated in the same public way. Otherwise, the whispers and doubts will never fully go away." After some discussion, they agreed, but with conditions. Law enforcement would be present. Everything would be documented. And if the Hendersons tried to leave, they'd be detained. The plan was set for the Saturday livestock auction, exactly 1 month after the original confrontation. The same place, the same audience, but this time with a very different outcome. The week leading up to that Saturday felt endless. Rachel tried to prepare herself mentally, but her emotions were all over the place. Anxiety, excitement, fear, righteous anger. They all swirled together until she felt constantly on edge. Dr. Wilson called her 2 days before the auction. "Rachel, I'm hearing some strange rumors. Something about you and Clayton making accusations against the Hendersons. Please tell me you're not doing something reckless." Rachel took a deep breath. "Dr. Wilson, I promise you, everything will make sense on Saturday. I just need you to trust me until then." "I'm worried about you," he said quietly. "These past weeks you've seemed different. Obsessed with that mare. I'm concerned you're not handling the stress well." "I'm handling it better than you think," Rachel said. "Just please come to the auction on Saturday. You'll understand everything." Saturday morning dawned clear and bright. Rachel loaded Duchess into the trailer, the mare now obviously pregnant to anyone with experience. She'd grown significantly in the past month, her belly rounded, her movements more careful. "This is your day, girl," Rachel told her. "You're about to prove to everyone just how not barren you are." The auction yard was packed. Word had spread that something unusual was going to happen, though most people didn't know what. They probably thought Rachel was going to make a fool of herself again. Clayton was already there, along with Linda and several other ranchers who'd become allies over the past month. The insurance investigators were there too, dressed casually to blend in. And positioned around the perimeter were several law enforcement officers, also in civilian clothes. The Hendersons arrived around 10, looking confident and relaxed. They had no idea what was coming. The regular auction proceeded normally for the first hour. Rachel stood near the back, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. People were staring at her, whispering. She heard someone say, "That's the vet who couldn't tell a barren mare. Wonder what she's doing back here." Then Clayton stepped into the center of the auction ring. The auctioneer looked confused but gave him the floor when Clayton showed some kind of paperwork. "Folks, I appreciate your patience. I have an important matter to discuss regarding a horse that was sold at this very auction 1 month ago." The crowd quieted. The Hendersons looked annoyed but not worried. They probably thought Clayton was going to complain about something minor. 1 month ago, Dr. Rachel Thompson was publicly accused of incompetence regarding her examination of a mare named Duchess. She was forced to purchase that horse for $15,000 after being told the mare was barren and worthless. People started nodding, remembering. Rachel felt their eyes on her. "I'm here today to present evidence that Dr. Thompson was not only competent, but was in fact the victim of a deliberate fraud scheme." Now people looked shocked. The Hendersons' expressions changed from annoyed to alarmed. "Bring out the mare," Clayton called. Linda led Duchess into the ring. The mare's pregnant belly was obvious now, undeniable even to casual observers. A murmur went through the crowd. "This is Duchess, the supposedly barren mare. As you can see, she is very much not barren. She is currently 6 months pregnant with a healthy foal." The murmuring grew louder. People were standing up to get a better look. Mr. Henderson stood up. "This is ridiculous. That horse wasn't pregnant when we sold her. Dr. Thompson must have bred her afterward and is now trying to blame us for genetic testing proves the foal was conceived 9 months ago, Clayton said loudly, cutting him off. Before Dr. Thompson ever examined the mare. In fact, I examined this exact horse 8 months ago and documented her pregnancy at that time. He held up papers. I have ultrasound images from my examination, dated and certified. The foal we see today is the same foal I documented 8 months ago. This mare was never barren. The Hendersons knew she was pregnant and lied about it. The crowd erupted. People were shouting questions. The Hendersons were trying to leave, but law enforcement officers blocked the exits. Rachel stepped forward, her legs shaking but her voice steady. I performed a competent professional examination of this mare. I recommended follow-up testing, which the Hendersons declined. My records from that examination were then altered digitally to make it appear I had declared the mare suitable for breeding when I had actually recommended additional evaluation. She held up her own documents. I have backup files proving my original examination notes were changed. The Hendersons used my preliminary assessment to file a false insurance claim, stating this mare was barren and unable to breed. They collected $25,000 from their insurance company based on that fraudulent claim. Dr. Wilson stood up in the crowd, his face pale. Rachel, are you saying? I'm saying I was set up. The Hendersons deliberately created a situation where they could blame me for their insurance fraud. And I'm not the only one. Dr. James appeared on a large screen that Linda had set up, joining via video call. They did the same thing to me 2 years ago. Forced me to buy a bull they claimed was sterile. Destroyed my practice. I had to leave the state. Dr. Patricia appeared on another screen. They manipulated my examination records and nearly cost me my license. I've lived with that shame for 3 years. The crowd was in chaos now. Everyone was talking at once. The Hendersons were being surrounded by law enforcement. The lead insurance investigator stepped forward, showing her credentials. We've been investigating the Hendersons for the past 3 weeks, based on evidence provided by Dr. Thompson and others. We found a pattern of fraudulent insurance claims dating back over 2 years, totaling approximately $200,000. An officer approached the Hendersons with handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. As the Hendersons were led away, still protesting, still trying to maintain their innocence, the crowd's attention turned to Rachel. Dr. Wilson pushed through to reach her. His eyes were full of tears. Rachel, I'm so sorry. I doubted you. I thought you'd made a mistake and I should have trusted you. I should have questioned what they were saying. You didn't know, Rachel said, though her voice was tight with emotion. None of you knew. That's what they counted on. Other ranchers began approaching, apologizing, asking if she was taking new clients. The mood had shifted completely. Rachel went from being the incompetent young vet to the brave whistleblower who'd exposed major fraud. Tom from Red Creek Ranch, who'd been one of the first to cancel his appointment, looked embarrassed. Dr. Thompson, I'd like to reschedule that cattle checkup if you're willing to take me back as a client. Of course, Rachel said. Mrs. Patterson appeared with Buster, her old dog. 3 months later, Rachel stood in her barn on a cold winter morning watching Duchess pace restlessly in her stall. The mare had been showing signs of early labor since midnight and everything was progressing normally. Easy, girl, Rachel said softly. You've got this. Clayton and Linda had driven down the night before when Rachel called to say Duchess was getting close. They weren't about to miss the birth of the foal that had helped expose one of the biggest livestock fraud cases in state history. How's she doing? Clayton asked, carrying in fresh bedding. Getting close. Maybe another hour or two. The past 3 months had been transformative. After the public confrontation at the auction, Rachel's clinic had gone from empty to overbooked within a week. She'd had to hire an assistant just to manage all the appointments. Ranchers from surrounding counties were calling, wanting the vet who'd stood up to the Hendersons. The news story had spread beyond the local area. The agricultural newspaper article had been picked up by state media, then regional outlets. Rachel had done interviews about veterinary ethics, fraud in the livestock industry, and the importance of trusting your professional judgment even when powerful people tell you you're wrong. The Hendersons were facing multiple criminal charges: insurance fraud, falsifying medical records, computer crimes for hacking into veterinary record systems. The evidence had been overwhelming, and their expensive lawyers hadn't been able to make it go away. But more importantly, 2 other veterinarians had come forward after seeing the news coverage. They'd been victims of similar schemes by other ranchers in different parts of the state. Rachel's case had opened the door for them to seek justice too. The state veterinary board had even asked Rachel to help develop new protocols for protecting electronic medical records and identifying signs of client fraud. She'd gone from disgraced young vet to respected expert in just a few months. She's definitely in active labor now, Linda observed, watching Duchess's movements carefully. Rachel checked the mare again. Won't be long. Everything looks good. Dr. Wilson arrived around 6 in the morning, looking excited despite the early hour. He'd been incredibly supportive since learning the truth, even referring some of his own clients to Rachel when his schedule got too full. Wouldn't miss this for the world, he said. This foal represents a lot more than just a new life. He was right. This foal represented truth prevailing over lies, justice winning against fraud. A young vet trusting her skills and knowledge even when the whole world seemed to say she was wrong. Duchess lay down in the straw. Labor was progressing quickly now. Here we go, Rachel said, moving closer to help if needed. The birth was textbook perfect. Duchess knew exactly what to do, and within 20 minutes, a beautiful bay filly lay in the straw, already trying to lift her head. She's gorgeous, Linda breathed. The filly had her mother's distinctive markings plus elegant features that spoke of championship bloodlines. As Rachel cleaned her up and made sure she was healthy, she couldn't help thinking about how differently this could have gone if she'd given up. If she'd accepted everyone's judgment that she was incompetent, if she'd let the Hendersons' lies stand unchallenged, this beautiful foal would have been born to people who'd used her mother as a pawn in their criminal scheme. All vitals are perfect, Rachel announced after a thorough examination. Healthy filly, strong and active. Duchess did great. Clayton was unusually quiet, watching mother and foal with an expression Rachel couldn't quite read. You know, he finally said, this filly is probably worth around $75,000. Maybe more, given her bloodlines and the publicity around her birth. A lot of breeders would pay premium price for the foal that helped expose the Henderson fraud case. Rachel looked at him in surprise. She'd been so focused on clearing her name and exposing the truth that she hadn't really thought about the financial value of what she now owned. I could offer to buy them from you, Clayton continued. Both Duchess and the filly. Give you enough money to expand your practice. Get all the equipment you've been wanting. Maybe even buy your own property instead of renting. Rachel looked at Duchess, who was nickering softly to her new baby. The mare had been called worthless and barren. She'd been used as a tool in a fraud scheme, but she'd also been the key to revealing the truth. Or, Clayton said, you could consider a different arrangement. What kind of arrangement? A partnership. You keep ownership of Duchess and the filly, but they stay here at my ranch. I help you develop a breeding program, teach you the business side of it. You provide veterinary services for my operation at a discounted rate. We co-manage any future foals, split the profits. Rachel's mind raced. Why would you offer me that? Clayton smiled. Because in the past 3 months I've watched you handle an impossible situation with intelligence, determination, and integrity. Those are exactly the qualities I need in a partner. I've been looking for someone to help me expand my operation. Someone trustworthy. I think that's you? Linda nodded enthusiastically. He's been talking about this for weeks. He's serious, Rachel. But I don't know anything about breeding programs or horse business. You didn't know anything about exposing fraud either, but you learned fast, Clayton said. Besides, you've got something more important than experience. You've got the respect of the entire ranching community now. My endorsement helped, but you earned that respect yourself. Rachel looked at Dr. Wilson, who was smiling. Sounds like an opportunity worth considering, he said. And I say that as someone who's watched a lot of young vets struggle to build sustainable practices. What Clayton's offering could set you up for a very successful career. The filly struggled to her feet, wobbling on impossibly long legs. She took a few unsteady steps toward Rachel, curious and fearless. She likes you, Linda laughed. Rachel reached out and let the filly sniff her hand. What do you think, little one? Should I take the partnership? The filly responded by trying to nibble Rachel's sleeve, making everyone laugh. I think that's a yes, Clayton said, over the next few hours. While Duchess rested and the filly explored her new world, they discussed the details. Clayton would provide facilities, breeding expertise, and business mentorship. Rachel would provide veterinary care, manage health protocols, and learn the breeding business. Any foals they bred would be jointly owned, with profits split based on each person's contribution to that particular breeding. I have one condition, Rachel said. Name it. This filly doesn't get sold. She stays with us, becomes part of our foundation breeding program. She represents too much to be sold off even for a premium price. Clayton extended his hand. Deal. I was hoping you'd say that. They shook on it, and Rachel felt like her whole world was shifting again. But this time in a good way. A very good way. The news coverage of the foal's birth brought even more attention. The local news did a story titled, "The Foal That Exposed Fraud," featuring interviews with Rachel, Clayton, and the other veterinarians who'd been victimized. Rachel's clinic had to expand. She hired 2 more assistants and started looking at buying her own facility instead of renting. The waiting list for appointments was weeks long. But the best moment came 3 weeks after the filly's birth. Rachel was at her clinic when Mrs. Patterson came in with Buster. Just a regular checkup, she said. Nothing wrong. I just wanted to keep to his schedule. As Rachel examined the old dog, Mrs. Patterson spoke quietly. You know, I've been thinking about what happened to you. How quickly everyone assumed you were incompetent. How eager people were to believe the worst instead of asking questions. It's okay, Rachel said. It's over now. But it shouldn't have happened in the first place, Mrs. Patterson insisted. And I'm ashamed I was part of it, even though I tried to be kind about it. I should have stood up for you. I should have questioned whether the Hendersons were telling the truth. Rachel finished the exam and sat down across from her. Mrs. Patterson, you couldn't have known. None of you could. They were very good at what they did. Maybe. But I learned something from watching you these past months. I learned that when someone tells you who they are through their actions, you should believe them. And you showed everyone through your actions that you were someone worth believing in. After Mrs. Patterson left, Rachel sat in her office for a while, thinking about how much had changed. 4 months ago, she'd been at the lowest point of her life, publicly humiliated, professionally destroyed, financially devastated. Now she had a thriving practice, a partnership with one of the most respected breeders in the state, and a reputation for integrity that opened doors everywhere she went. Her phone buzzed. A message from Clayton with a photo attached. It showed Duchess and her filly standing in a sunny pasture, both healthy and beautiful. The caption read, "Your investment is looking good." Rachel smiled. That $15,000 she'd been forced to spend had seemed like the end of everything. Instead, it had been the beginning of something better than she could have imagined. She opened her laptop and started drafting an article she'd been asked to write for a veterinary journal. The topic was maintaining professional integrity in the face of client pressure. She had a lot to say about that now. As she wrote, she thought about all the young veterinarians out there facing their own challenges.